Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. This week I want to talk about budget constraints and the production possibilities curve. So I've done a short video here to introduce the topic. So I want to pull up our whiteboard, and first I'm going to talk about budget constraints. In economics, we say that any kind of budget constraint is a constraint on your resources in any way, shape, or form. It could be time, it could be a money as in budget money, it could be any constraint you have of a resource. So let's use time for an example. Let's say that you have 2 tests to study for, and you only have a total of 8 hours to study. And you need to study for economics and an accounting test. So you have an economics and an accounting test, and you only have 8 hours to allocate to your studying. So that's your constraint. You're budgeted only 8 hours. You're constrained. So there's a lot of different ways you could use those 8 hours. If we put some marks on our graph here and we make this 8, 4 like this, so you could study all 8 hours for economics, and that would leave 0 for accounting. That is possible. You could also study all 8 hours for accounting and 0 for economics if that's how you wanted to allocate your time, if you wanted to allocate your resources. Or you could study 4 hours each, 4 hours on economics and 4 hours for accounting. Or you could do 6 hours on economics and 2, or 6 and 2. And what we see is that all of these combinations form this line. This is what we call a budget constraint line. This shows that we can study anywhere, any combination along this line. 8 and 0, 4 and 4, 0 and 8, 6 and 2. Anywhere on this line, we can allocate our resources this way. Anywhere outside this line, like 8 hours and 8 hours here, we can't do. That won't work. We don't have enough time. We also know that we could feasibly allocate our resources anywhere underneath this line. For example, we could do 2 hours toward economics and 2 hours here. That's a possible point, but we say that this wouldn't be efficient. It's not economically efficient because it's not using our whole budget that we've allocated towards studying. So that's a budget constraint shown graphically. When we talk about this as a function of business or economies, we call it the production possibilities curve. And we draw it on a very similar graph, and we look at the goods and services that an economy can produce. So let's consider the most simple economy we can imagine. Imagine you're one person trapped on a desert island and you only have 2 things that you can eat. You can spend your day trying to catch fish, or you can spend your day gathering coconuts. So those are the 2 things you can do. 0 is, of course, here at the axis. And let's say that you have 10 hours a day that you can work toward either fish or coconuts. So you have 10 hours that you could allocate one way or another toward these 2 things. So it is possible that you could spend all 10 hours fishing and no time gathering coconuts, or you could spend your entire time gathering coconuts and no time fishing. We'll put a midpoint in here for each of these. And we know that you could spend 5 hours on one and 5 on the other. And we see, again, this line develop as a production possibilities frontier where we know you could produce anywhere along this line. You could do all fish, all coconuts, or any combination thereof. We know that anywhere outside this line is not achievable based on your current level of technology and your current abilities. We know that any level inside here is achievable, but would be inefficient. It would not be using your whole time. But what were to happen if you were to build a fishing net? So you spent some time building a fishing net and you got more efficient at fishing. What this would do was allow us to capture more fish in this time and might make fishing more attractive than gathering coconuts. So we might assume you could catch more fish in less time, and we would expect you to move in this direction, spending less time fishing, using your net, and allocating more time toward gathering coconuts. So these are some examples of the production possibilities frontier and budget constraints and how we use them in economics. Now, our modern economies are not as simple as a desert island with one or two things that we produce, but we're constrained by our time and resources. Remember, we talk about scarce resources in economics. Scarcity is always a fact of life. We're always constrained by scarce resources, and we have to accept trade-offs in economics. And this is the study of how we make those trade-offs. Now, an economy might not be as simple as fish and coconuts, but we can think of, for instance, healthcare and everything else on another axis. So we might consider how many resources we allocate toward something like healthcare, or how many resources we allocate toward manufacturing versus everything else in our economy. It's a way for us to begin thinking of constraints and limits and trade-offs and how we make those decisions.